The parent, we worry about the everyday things that our kids need, but how often do we think about those underlying needs that they have? Well, that's the topic of today's podcast. And Kristina Campos, the founder of The Impactful Parent, is joining me to talk more about it. Kristina, it's really good to see you. I love this topic because I worry every day about, are they eating well? Do they have their homework? And we tend to get caught up in those things. But I know that you're going to give us some tips on some really important underlying themes that all kids need.
That's right. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, great to have you. So let's just start off with your background. I know you're a teacher. I know you've taught at every level, and I know you have 4 kids. So you've pretty much seen it all.
I have. I've seen so much, yes. And I still substitute teach as much as I can.
But you decided to leave your job as a teacher to help other families.
I did. I came to that crossroads in my life where my kids needed my time and attention. They were emerging teenagers at the time. And, and I have 4 kids. And I just saw that they needed me. And I don't just do a half job of teaching. It's not a 9-to-5 job. I take it home with me. I put my heart into my students. And I was coming home exhausted. I couldn't do both. I couldn't give my kids what they needed and give my students what they wanted. And so I had to make some really tough choices.
I hear you. I did the same thing, sister. I know. So let's talk about what you found as a teacher and as a mom, as those underlying principles and needs. Give me tip number 1, the thing that our kids need.
Well, the first thing that kids need is security. Now, let me break that down though for you, because I think a lot of the 3 things that kids need that I consider the big foundation, the pillars of what we really need to concentrate on as parents, they get really misunderstood. And there's actually 2 parts to security. There's a physical security, and that comes from our primal need, like caveman days, like, I'm going to keep you safe. The bear is not going to eat you. So there's that physical security that you want to give your child. But more than that, there's also security in love, that with knowing that, will you love them no matter what, through thick and thin? Will you love them when they disagree with your ways? Will you love them when they don't get straight A's? They need to have that really secure space in their heart, knowing that their parents got their back, and no matter what they do, their parents are going to love them.
So let me ask you this, because I know with 4 kids, I have 3 kids, every single one of them will test that. Yeah. Will you still love me if I break your rule? I'll still love you, but you have to follow the rules. What do you find with that? When did they first start testing that? Will you still love me if?
Oh, yeah. So the best kids, the most perfect, like well-behaved children will still test all 3 of these, even subconsciously. So, and it starts very early, even as they're toddlers, they don't even realize it. But that's when they start it, and we just have to keep reminding them. And it's more than just reminding them. When you're trying to create the secure feeling for them, for example, when my kids get in trouble and they do not behave the way I want, I'm very stern with them. I set my boundaries, but at the end of the day, and when I'm even going through the discipline process with them, I say, this is not acceptable, but let me tell you why we're doing it. This is because I love you. You have to be able to have these skills. You have to be able to control your emotions. You have to be able to, all these things, whatever the discipline might be. I'm doing this because I love you. And I even have a special little routine that from time to time before my kids go to bed, I tell them, I love you no matter what. I love you when you're bad. I love you when you're good. I love you when you make bad choices. I love you always. And I say that to them, especially when they're being good, because then I remind them when they're being bad.
I remember getting some advice early when my oldest daughter was young, and she was a tough cookie. She still is strong-willed, amazing young woman, strong-willed. And I remember getting the advice of, when they disagree with you, saying, I love you too much to argue with you. And that's it. No argument. We're not going to interact like that. I just love you too much to argue. And it's great to have those things those phrases that you say in the times when you know you're going to need them most, because they don't come to you quickly when there's a disagreement. So having that ready. I love you too much to argue with you. Turn around and walk away.
That's right. That's good
Yeah.
practice. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's get to the second pillar.
Now, the second one is acceptance. And they just need to know that you're going to love them for their authentic self. And this is especially important for teenagers who are trying to discover who they are, and they're trying all these different hats on to see if they fit. And they want to know that you, as your parent, will accept them for whoever they choose to become. Mm. They want their parents to look beyond their choices, their grades, their choice of friends, and instead accept them for who they are. Now, I know this sounds a lot like that security and love, but let me give you an example of how this is different. And the best way that I've thought how to do this is to compare it to the LGBTQ community. And that would be like, if you have a child who identifies with the LGBTQ community, you may tell your child, I love you no matter what, but you may not accept them for being gay, lesbian, trans, whatever part that they that they identify within that community. And if you don't accept them, there's a lack there. That's how acceptance is a little bit different than that security and love. Yeah. The love is different. Does that make sense?
It does. It's almost as if they don't feel loved if they're not accepted. Even if you say it, they have to feel it.
They have to really feel it.
How have you experienced this over the years as a teacher with parents? Because you've seen both sides, being a parent, being a teacher, being on the side of the kids, but knowing how hard it is for parents to sometimes accept that their kids might have different feelings than they do about life, or about how they dress, or about what they want to study. Like, I think of this in a lot of different ways, with one in college and one going to college, and what she wants, and us accepting what she wants to study, versus for a lot of parents having a preconceived idea of what they want their kids to be.
And that's exactly where the disappointment comes from with the parent. When our child's born, the minute we find out that we're pregnant, bam, in our mind, we got visions. We see wedding dresses. We see babies coming.
You got a quarterback and a doctor. You get all these ideas.
And what happens when you have a child that doesn't want to go to college at all? Not just not major in what you want them to major in, but doesn't even want to go. Or is never going to have the big wedding dress because maybe they just don't really, they just don't have an interest to get married someday. That's really hard for parents to accept. And it all comes from parents having expectations. And I can go on a whole other tangent about how expectations like ruins connection with your child, because that is really a root of a lot of parenting problems that start in the home. But on the surface level, yeah, it's so tough for parents to let go of a vision that they have for their kid and truly accept them for who they are, even if it's not what they really had thought it was going to be. It's almost like a parent has to go through a mourning, like that loss, so they can truly accept the new person standing in front of them. And it's really tough to do. But if a parent doesn't go through that process, now it's going to trickle down to the child, and the child doesn't feel accepted. And now they have that one of those pillars fallen.
Yeah. You really have to go back and think of yourself as a child at whatever stage that is, a young person, college student, and think how you so desperately wanted that independence, and you wanted your parents to be happy with accepting whatever it is you want to be. Like, think back of where you were then. It's much harder to do than, as you said, it's much easier to say than to do, I should say. But so important. So we've got love, we've got real acceptance, and the difference between the two. What's the third pillar?
The third one is power. Now, this one I really have to explain, but your child is craving power. And what I mean by that is that they want to know that they matter. They want to feel like they have some kind of influence in their environment, that their existence, it matters, that somebody would miss them if they were gone. And especially parents that tend to be really over controlling and they don't give their child a lot of power in their life, those kids really, really struggle. And although this is probably, of all the three, this is probably the easiest one to correct, because giving your child power really just means giving them choice, giving them some sort of choice in their life.
Give me an example. And you've got 4 kids at different stages too.
Oh, yeah.
Where have you implemented this? Where have you had trouble with it?
Oh, well, it starts in the toddler years again, right? Your toddler will go ahead and test, do I have power? Let's take, for example, that the toddler that wants to tie their own shoes before they walk out the door. And yet you have to get out the door because it's time for that appointment.
Much easier to do it yourself.
Oh, yes. So what do? You go up to the toddler, you tie their shoe for them, and you get them out of there. And what do? They, no, stop it. Don't do that. I want to do it. I want to do it. You know, they start to yell at you because they want to do it themselves. They want some source of power. So in that situation, what you would say is, look, I'll give you 5 minutes, but in 5 minutes, we have to get out the door. You know, in 5 minutes, you're coming right back to that toddler who still has not finished tying their shoe. At that point, you tell your child, look, I'm so sorry, but we have to leave. I'm going to tie your shoe for you. But look, either way, you don't have a choice. We have to get to the car. Mom needs to get to this next place quickly. But how do you want to get to the car? Do you want to act like a monkey? Do you want to be a giraffe? Do you want me to carry you? Once we get to the car, do you want to hear your music? It's about shifting the choice.
Giving them the power somewhere else.
Somewhere else. Yes. And power, I mean, it does, you have to set boundaries for your child, because boundaries create the security that they need, which was need number 1. But you do also have to create that balance of giving them some power in their life, letting them make the choice and fail, and be there for them to pick them up when they have to learn from that mistake, but giving them the choice. So many parents are afraid to let their kids suffer in any way. I can't let them do that because I'm not going to let them walk out the door without a jacket. That's stupid. They're going to freeze.
Right.
Well, if you don't, then they're never going to learn how to put on the jacket.
Right. They have to experience the cold to know they really probably should have gotten the jacket. Right. It reminds me of another piece of advice I had early on that was giving them the 2 choices. And it was a jacket, was, do you want to carry your jacket or do you want to put your jacket on? But either way, the jacket's going with you. But you don't have to say that. Do you want to carry the jacket or do you want to put the jacket on? If they carry it, they're soon going to realize it's cold out. Maybe I should put it on. But giving them 2 choices as an adult, as the parent, that you can live with, but they have the power. Am I right in that?
Is so important, because if your child doesn't have any choices in their life and they become an emerging teenager, let's say, and they're craving. Teenagers need choice because they're trying to figure their own self out, right? And you see teenagers exercising that power every day, right? But if you don't give it to them, that teenager is going to feel powerless. Powerless makes them go into their room and feel hopeless. Hopelessness makes them turn into depression. And unfortunately, depression could lead to self-harm. And I know it sounds like a little domino effect went too quick there. It's that fast.
It does. Yeah. So giving them that power, helping them feel that power, gives them confidence.
It does, especially if you're there to catch them, if they make the mistake and you're not being judgy and you're saying, look, next time, what's the better choice? And you start processing with them, not telling them next time, hey, you should have just taken the jacket, right? I mean, they don't want to hear that. Teenagers want to hear that. But you could process it differently and say, okay, look, next time would have been better if what? You did what? And you let them answer the question, and it doesn't come off as judgy and harsh, but you're still getting the message across. And one of the best things that parents can do when their child does make a bad choice is not overreact. and I really, really mean this, because I know that if your child crashes the car, you're going to feel a million sets of emotion inside, and rage is going to be one of them. But the problem is that if you overreact, even for the small stuff or to the big stuff, it doesn't matter. When your child needs you, they will not come to you if you are an overreactor, because they're going to be afraid. The last thing that a parent wants is their child to be afraid to tell them, hey, I'm in trouble. I need you.
Right. Yeah. Oh, such good advice. So true. Because there will, as a parent, there will be shocking times. There just will be, from whatever it might be, from young age up to the teenage years, where they're exposed to some really difficult stuff, and they're going to need you to be there without that, that shocking, how did you term it? That you can't react in a shocking way that scares them.
That scares them. You can't overreact to it. Right. And I will say, parents, if you are listening to this right now and you're an overreactor and you're like, well, I've been doing it wrong for years, all you have to do to correct that is, let's say you just can't help yourself. They crash the freaking car and it just drives you crazy, right? You overreact because you're human too. When you do calm down, you go to them and say, look, I'm sorry I overreacted. You really got me there with this choice, and it's going to cost me money. You tell them why you overreacted. It cost me money. This is now, I'm not going to be able to get to work. How am I going to get to work? I'm going to have to drive the bus now. Or, you explain to them why the overreaction happened. And then you just say, look, I'm sorry. But then you go on with the boundaries and the punishment. But admitting that you made a mistake in that reaction also goes a really long way.
Sure, because you're modeling for them that they may overreact someday too, but you have to admit it. Yeah.
And that's super hard. None of this is easy for parents. It sounds so easy. Oh, security, acceptance, and power.
It's not.
It's not.
But I'm going to encourage people though, and I'm going to do it myself too, to 3 sticky notes. I'm going to put them on my computer with those 3 pillars that every day I'm going to remind myself that my kids need at every stage, from babies up to my college kid. I mean, we all need that. They especially need it from their parents. Kristina, you're wonderful. Thank you for such great advice. I have 2 questions that I like to ask all of my guests. I think we learn from each other. And my first question is, what tool, and it can be anything, do you find most useful for productivity?
Ooh, I use a schedule. I'm a list maker, and I check things off, and that makes me feel good. And it makes me organized. I know exactly what I'm doing every single day because of that. I love lists.
I know. I like checking things off. It feels really good, doesn't it? And then my second question is, what is your purpose, and when did you discover? Everybody discovers it at a different time of life. When did you discover your purpose?
I think that my purpose is to help people, and whether it's students and children or whether it's parents now, I think it's shifted over the years, but it's still about giving more back to my community and helping people. And I think I discovered that when I was in college and I was trying to figure out what I want to be. And as I was exploring being a teacher at that time, I went into the classroom, and it just made me feel so good to help students, to get them to solve that math problem, or I used to teach Spanish. So, to get them to speak in a different language, that makes me feel good. And that's when I really started to clicked in my brain.
Well, you are talented. And I know working with parents, with kids in the classroom, you're very much appreciated. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Great. Hope to talk to you again soon.